Good afternoon. Let's try that again. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome to the African American Experience, the first term of a 3-term course. This is Down from the Pyramids, Up from Slavery. If you're in the right place. Good. I'm Mark Harris. I developed the course out of my home training. And what I'm going to do now, instead of the usual class mechanics, which we will get to, is I'm going to take you on a little griot journey. Griots are traditional, there's no real English equivalent for them, but they're a storyteller, musician, poet, diplomat, healer, etc., rolled into one. In some of the traditional societies in Africa and West Africa. The way that I like to do this, since you're in the classroom and there are also people watching by remote, you can email questions by remote. You can ask questions anytime for clarification. Obviously, since you just got the syllabus, you haven't done the reading yet. But it is a reading intense class only because you need some background if you haven't come to this, and if this is the first time you've been exposed to some of this material, which I guarantee you will be. My operating philosophy with this class, having grown up in the American school system, is usually the treatment of Black history until we started rioting in the mid-'60s and agitating for a more expanded curriculum, is that it was slavery and Martin Luther King, and that was pretty much it. Well, I thought that that's crazy, because why start with slavery? Slavery is like the scab on an otherwise healthy body. Now, you can pick at the scab, but you're not focusing on the fact that there's a healthy body. So, for example, if you start with slavery, and then right after slavery, Black people are getting elected to office, and those congressmen and senators speak 5 languages and are traveling to Europe. Now, how did they get 5 languages in the educational system that could be afforded to by former slaves? Not in America. So they had multilingual capability before they got to America. So to explain why that is, you have to go back before slavery. How far back? I chose 12,000 BC. That's before the pyramids are built. Now, human beings, and I'm sorry if I offend you, you're a fundamentalist Christian, you believe that the world is only 5,000 years old. We got calendars older than that. They date back before Christianity. So let's go with the science. I'm a social scientist. So let's say that Homo sapiens sapiens has been around for 200,000, maybe 250,000 years. I have an app on my iPad that says that the cradle of civilization is like around 12,000 years old. Well, okay, that still leaves 186,000 years of Homo sapiens sapiens. Like, people were just waiting around for over 100,000 years and just suddenly got civilized. I ain't buying that. But you gotta go with a certain story and do with the stories that make sense. So let's start. So when we talk about, when I identify as an African American, because I'm old enough to remember when we were called various other names and the transition between all those and the reason about all those. And so when I say African American, I'm talking about dating our time to when we first came here, according to both the Native Americans and our own historical records. Now, the reason I started with a pyramid is if you can construct a pyramid, all right? So what a pyramid is, first of all, it takes a pretty big workforce, and I'm going with the volunteer workforce, not the slave workforce. All right? So you need to feed those people. You need metallurgy. That is, you need to know which rocks to burn to separate out the copper so that you can cut the limestone and put it in place. So you need metallurgy. Like, how do you even develop the idea that you burn a particular rock in a certain way to melt it to get metal out of it? So metallurgy, geology, astronomy, social organization. That's a lot, all right? So from African, the first time that we were recorded to be here, according to the historical and archaeological evidence, is 850 BC. That's the 25th dynasty of Egypt. Now, each dynasty is a royal family that could span 1,000 years. The 25th dynasty of Egypt is 850 BC. Now, if you can design a pyramid, does it make sense that you could also have you could sail the world? Makes sense, especially if you have the concept of longitude and latitude and magnetic compasses? Yes, you can. All right? So, African. And then American. Now, this is an artist's representation of Lucia. Lucia is the Turtle Island equivalent, and the reason I'm using Turtle Island instead of North and Central and South America is I'm just using the name that was here before contact. All right? So North, Central, and South America, according to the indigenous people, is Turtle Island, all of it. All right? In Africa, we called it the circuit of the world. That is, the only continent on the planet that stretches from the North Pole to the South Pole unbroken. And the only way you can know that is to sail it. Because I'm assuming there's not aliens and all that. I'm not, I like a good science fiction story, but yeah, you can take that too far. Lucia is the oldest skeleton found on Turtle Island. And they call her Paleo-Indian, the features are clearly Africoid. So they called her Lucia after the Portuguese, because she was found in Brazil, all by herself in a cave, nobody else around. So African American. African. I realize there may be children, but whatever. Listen, this is a statue that basically represents a continual reality That is that of what are referred to in English as the intersex. That is, along the continuum, you will have people that have both male and female features in one. And this is a statue. In Gamvi, I believe it's called. I'll have to check, because it's a village that is actually on stilts in the middle of a lake. And they basically did that to get away from the slavers. So I saw that and I go, oh, wow, okay. So what if that isn't just symbolic, but from life? Is that possible? Yes, we actually have 4 million, or 4% of all human births on that continuum, where that is one extreme where you have both sets of visible, functional genitalia, to what we call heterosexual. Okay, 4 million a year. Currently, that's about 4 million folks born a year. 4% of all human births. So, if such people are being born to you, how do you account for them? How do you integrate them into your society? Is there any question about whether you have equal rights, et cetera, et cetera? Do people trip about that? No. In the societies before we get to what I referred to later as weaponized Christianity, we did not have that. People didn't trip. Same thing that happened in Turtle Island as well. But we'll get to that. American. This is one of the Olmec heads. It is a representation, I think, of Memnon, but without going into the Memnon story, each one of these heads, and there's hundreds of them in Mexico, what's now called Mexico, they're 10 tons each. So the size of one of the doors, 10 tons of volcanic basalt, quarried without the use of the wheel and brought to where they rest and carved in place.
Say the Olmec did it?
Yes, they're attributed to the Olmec. Whether the Olmec did it or why they did it is an open question. But they're attributed to the Olmec. This is a Voodoo ceremony. This person is being ridden by a loa. Practitioners of Voodoo, or what you know by its French Franco-corrupted name, Voodoo, they basically say that their religion is 100,000 years old. Now, whether this is a show put on for tourists or not, just to make a statement like that, given what they're doing and what the elements of the ritual, it's easy to believe that this is 100,000 years old. Yes?
How did you pronounce it again? You said Voodoo, but it's...
Voodoo, it's Ifa, I-F-A, Voodoo, V-O-D-O-N, Voodoo, or Voodoo, the usual spelling. Yes?
That's not that hard to picture, because Egyptians, according to them, the Egyptian civilization is like over 30,000 years old.
Right. True. Exactly. But again, we're speaking English in the United States of America using the Columbus Discovered America curriculum, which I was raised on, and anybody that went through, K-16 was raised on as well. So you have to have a shift to be able to take all this stuff in a lot of times. That's me with a python, a sacred python. That is a representation of Queen Nzinga of what's now Angola, warrior queen. And General Harriet Tubman. This, usually the treatment of this history starts with slavery. This is Elmina Castle in Ghana. This is the door of no return. In that particular slave fort, where people go out and they never come back. They never come back to Africa. There's a similar one just across the bay, Cape Coast. And this is an altar built over the door of no return there as an attempt of healing. So it's not just a tourist attraction, but all right, slavery is a wound. You have to heal the wound properly. One way of doing it is basically spiritually attempting to salve that wound that you may or may not be aware that you're having, because there is this door there, and because there's still a channel for water when it rains to go out the door. Now, even though the tribal chiefs, since slavery had been going on for a while, even though the tribal chiefs believed, well, actually, they didn't really think about what they were selling people into, because they felt that, their model of slavery wasn't permanent. You could basically earn your freedom, and that's what they thought they were selling folks who were descended from slavery into. But even so, there used to be a tree at the spot of this particular statue, which is basically a mermaid like Mother Africa calling the folks back home. And the idea is they actually march the slaves 3 times counterclockwise around this tree, and they forget where they came from. Therefore, if they die on the voyage, they won't come back to haunt you, because they've forgotten. So the tree of forgetfulness has been cut down. And in that place, they're realizing, especially because it's, to be honest, it's a tourist trade. All right? So people are coming back to, discover their roots, like Alex Haley, et cetera, et cetera. Lots of Americans are willing to pay mucho bucks to come back to these different spots. So they have this statue where the tree of forgetfulness used to be, and come home. Rest your spirit. This is a quote from a book that was used to build this class. It's currently out of print, but it's from before the Mayflower. African thought is conditioned by their ontology, that is, their theory of the nature of being. For them, being is a process and not a mere state. And the nature of things is thought of in terms of force or energy rather than matter. The forces of the spirit, human, animal, vegetable, and mineral worlds are all constantly influencing each other. And by a proper knowledge and use of them, a man or a human may influence his own life and that of others. So, peace, Hotep, means peace in Kemetic or Egyptian. In the Semitic languages, the sister languages, Salam, Shalama, Selam, Shalom. That's peace in the Semitic languages. In Kiswahili, peace is a umoja. Here on Turtle Island, the Aztec, Mashika Tawi, all my relations. And here the Yankala Kalipuya, Gamshi Lahuan. Excuse my pronunciation if you're actually Kalipuya. And also what's called Yom HaZikaron, the Day of Remembrance, celebrated in Israel in April, I believe it was this year. Remembrance in Hebrew, Yom HaZikaron, like its sister language Arabic, zikr, which is a spiritual practice which is remembrance. So we're here to remember. So this is a prayer, if you will, for remembrance, peace, and understanding, whether you consider the year as 5781, an Egyptian calendar, or 2012. So, in a continuing mission to dispel the forces of ignorance and oppression and encouraging unity, we begin. So, reading 2 books. The first one that we're in, because remember that in putting together this class, I ran into a problem. No single book, until I write it, encompasses the time period. Because most people start in slavery. I mean, even black historians usually start in slavery because of, I got really tired of that. So I put together this class from a bunch of different books, and one of them was They Came Before Columbus. But reading The History of Africa by Molefe Asante, which we'll be reading for the first, we won't be reading all of it this class, just about the first third of it. And then the time period is taken up from where Molefe leaves off in the section that I've assigned for reading, and taken up by To Make Our World Anew by Kelly and Lewis. I will also supplement readings and other information provided by myself. So part of your syllabus is a 92 book list. You're not having to read them. It basically is a resource. Most of the book, well, I have all the books, but many of the books were used to build the class. And so I can make reference to them, and they make interesting reading. So, expectations. If you read, I believe in empowerment. Knowledge is something that can't be taken away from you, but you give it away and it multiplies it. So if you do not read, you'll be limited to what's presented in lecture format, which really doesn't require you to pay attention, especially if you're watching television, because television doesn't predispose you to think. Not that you can't think. Okay? So it's not, so we're not just taking notes for a test. This is basically using the part of the lens of African culture to make it relevant for your life. We talk about history because there's a saying, what goes around comes around. It's going to come around again. They're going to run the same game on you, especially if it worked the first time. And especially, the politics of being here for 20 years. For how many of you, am I the first black teacher you've ever had in your educational career?
You're mine. It's true.
Yeah. So, one of the things that happens with that is, I'm using, I'm a black instructor using books written by black historians and scientists. It's a revelation to some people that there are black historians and scientists, but why not? So I'm usually teaching to mostly white folks. And the idea is not necessarily to make you feel bad or guilty, but also look at what was done to us because of race is being done to you for the money. Straight up. So you best to find out what the game is. Really. You should.
Well, anybody that would think that we're not indentured servants or...
Yeah, they may call it indentured servitude, but they're doing the same thing to, the reason they're treating you better is because they paid money